And he's got a sporting injury, and I wish you the best of luck getting better. And that's a lifestyle-related injury because he chooses to do rugby. And you shamed this man over here for being obese from a lifestyle point of view. Why is that not the thing? Where do you draw the line with the lifestyle?
If you it's Ellie, isn't it,
yes.
Dr. Cannon?
Yes.
Dr. Cannon, if you recall, we were exploring the idea of obesity and the fact that it's one of the fastest-growing areas. Of course, young men and women who break their legs climbing mountains or whatever is another aspect, but it is an area that's consuming money, as you will know as a GP.
People like
no one's
that,
shaming. No one's shaming. I'm offering him support. Let's come back. We'll come back, and he's making progress, and I hope you do well, and we all agree. Let's speak to Catherine Jones. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I'm absolutely. Maybe we'll have a race. Catherine Jones, you're the 5 News health correspondent. You've been looking specifically at people who don't really know how to handle A&E.
That's right. I think there's a perfect storm of pressure coming from the elderly and the chronically ill and the people who are obese. But there's also a pressure from the young. The largest group, apart from under 3s, that go to A&E are 18 to 30-year-olds. It's Club 1830. Now, is it that they don't know where to go? Is it they just want that next-day delivery culture? No one understands yet, but no one can help being chronically ill or old, but the young could educate themselves better about where to go. And I think if we've got to target somewhere, that's a place to start.
All right. Perhaps keep watching Channel 5 for those reports. Now, for the politicians, the NHS really is a battleground. Whoever wins the war will probably win the election because, according to all the polls, the NHS is the biggest factor in deciding how we'll vote in May. So, to our new panel, GP, author and broadcaster Dr. Phil Hammond, broadcaster and author Lynn Fallswood, also a Vice President of the Patients Association, Dr. Bob Gill, a GP who trains junior doctors to work in casualty, and London paramedic Stuart Gray. Phil, let's go back to you, and particularly this aspect of A&E. How much is it the GP's fault? I hate to use that word, but they got a good deal, they don't want to work nights and weekends.
What I really detest about your approach is this blame culture. Don't blame patients for being overweight. Don't blame immigrants for coming over here. The NHS would fall to pieces if it wasn't for immigrants. Don't blame GPs who are busting a gut to do a good job. This problem has been 5 years in the making. Myself and lots of other people warned if you have 5 years of pretty much flatline funding in the NHS, a ridiculous set of confusing reforms that aren't necessary and make it worse, plus huge cuts in social care, that will cause a crisis and casualty, and we've said this 5 years ago, and that is the problem.
So how is it put right?
It's very hard to put it right, but as we said earlier, you've got to say you get what you pay for in the NHS. It's like an elastic band. You can only stretch it so far and it will snap. We put less of our GDP than most other developed countries in. Yes, I'm perfectly prepared to pay more tax. Who would pay more tax for a better NHS? There you go. Thank you very much. I'm not a politician. Politicians have ruined the NHS. We've had 15 reforms in my 30 years as a doctor, none of them evidence-based, all of them very damaging.
Politicians? Aren't you blaming politicians now? You blamed...
I'm saying they should collaborate. We've got some brilliant politicians with great minds. If they collaborated and rebuilt the NHS based on evidence, compassion and joined-up care, Jeremy Hunt, Andy Burnham get together saying, let's get all our best minds together, rebuild the NHS with collaboration. Unless you have collaboration, you have an NHS with fear where we demonise whistleblowers, patients are frightened to speak up.
In all honesty, how likely is it that they would get, in a sentence?
I think they will. NHS and pensions are the two most... There will be a coalition and they'll have to.
All right. Lynn, let's come to you in a moment. Lynn Fallswood, you had to attend... Excuse me, we'll come to you in a second.
That's a fair point.
In a second. You're up next, sir. Hold on. Lynn Fallswood, you had to go to A&E recently. What did you do to make sure that you got treatment?
Well, I had a lifestyle injury for a start. I'm a runner and I fell and bust my chin open. I went... But my nearest hospital round the corner from me doesn't have me on their computer, so I went to one that's about 5 miles away, which did have me on their computer, and there was a 5-hour wait in one hospital and I rang around, another one had a 3-hour wait, and another one had an 1.5 hour wait. And I think that's quite a sensible thing to do, actually, to ring around. But I also think, I've got 2 sisters who are nurses. There are brilliant people in the NHS. There are great places to go to. We just don't know at the moment which ones are great and which aren't. I mean, bowel cancer's my thing. There are great places where I can get my life saved. It was saved. I could have gone somebody else and I might not have survived. And all this stuff with the Cancer Drugs Fund, we're creating something that's really unequal. We shouldn't be giving a bit of money here because there's votes in it. It's a political football now.
Dr. Gill, you're there, again, on the front line training doctors. What do you hear back from them?
Well, I'm a GP trainer, so my trainees go through A&E, and basically they can't wait to get out of A&E. The pressure is so intense. But there's an elephant in the room here. This is the privatisation agenda. It's a standard technique. You can't privatise something that is functioning well.
All right.
So you restrict the money, you make it fail, you find scapegoats such as undeserving patients, as you've tried to point out today. And the other scapegoats lined up to take the blame are GPs, and we've seen a bit of that today.
All right.
But the agenda that everybody needs to be clear about is we're heading towards a US insurance system, and that's what we need to...
We're looking at that later. Stuart Gray, you've got a radical idea we were talking about earlier.
This lady's very angry, and quite rightly so. We have a great NHS. It needs funding. It needs to be reviewed. It needs to be rebuilt. But if we rebuild it and we ignore some of the real problems we've got underneath, like drunkenness, binge drinking, I know you said that I know you said we shouldn't be scapegoating patients, but is a person who goes to a club and drinks all night and then falls down drunk in a gutter a seriously ill, critical patient, or is the 80-year-old lady who's stuck behind locked doors that we cannot get to for 5 hours because we're dealing with a 21-year-old who knew what she was going to do or he was going to do when he left the house? Why are we funding that? We could save a lot of money by telling them they have to pay once they're told by a doctor.
So you would make those drunks pay.
They have to pay a penalty.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll come back to that idea. Cheryl Baker, your mother-in-law died in an NHS hospital after. Listen to what I'm. Please. You lost your mother-in-law after she contracted C. diff bug in an NHS hospital. What pressures did you see there?
Well, there was one time when she was in hospital. It's a very undignified condition, as you can imagine. C. diff affects the bowels, so I don't have to go any further. You can understand what her life was like. And several times she had to go into hospital, and she contracted it because she was being treated very, very well, I must say, for cancer. And but unfortunately, she also contracted C. diff in the hospital, which killed her. But there was one time when she went in and they didn't have a bed. They didn't have a bed, and she was in a holding area overnight with other patients, and she had this really, really catching infection that was potentially lethal. And she was laying with other patients. It was just so wrong.
Another graphic illustration. Well, after the break, we know the illnesses, but is there a cure? Putting forward some radical remedies for the NHS after this.
I think there's far, far more pressure on young people today.
They have so many choices which we didn't have as teenagers.
I couldn't believe the difference in her when she came back.
He was just a completely different person.
Jumping off cliffs.
Meeting new people from all over the country.
She's just grown as a person.
He understands life a little bit better as well.
NCS this, NCS that, and she's still going on about it now.
National Citizen Service. Some things in life you shouldn't miss out on.
Excuse me, could we have your attention, please?
Babies are choking on innocent-looking things like us, and we've had enough. I'm a baby that chokes babies. Such a tragic irony.
If your baby is choking, lay them face down on your thigh. Then one gives up to 5 back blows.
If that doesn't work, turn them over and give them up to 5 chest thrusts.
Until the airway is clear.
And if that still doesn't work, call an ambulance.
Now please, share this film with your human friends. We're just small miscellaneous objects, that's all.
Oh, speak for yourself, dear. I own a castle.
Treats time, Felix. Yummy flavours, fun textures, irresistible mix. Yes! Clever cats pick Felix treats every time.
Martin's put the wrong fuel in his car. That's a big deal. If he misses a date with Jenny, she might think he doesn't care. And she might write a song about his piggy eyes, which becomes an overnight smash sensation in 146 countries, including Finland. Don't worry, Martin. Green Flag will cover you even if you fill up with the wrong fuel. Green Flag, no matter what.
You should give your customers something for being good drivers. Of course.
Good driver discount. Chat to Churchill. Now you can play the health lottery for even less with
on the telephone of my Union Live podcast. Just was the the MSR one is just could get some. The problem has been 5 years in the making. People's been saying, watching energetic writers and like debate, join in this discussion and having a lot of debate.
Scientifically tailored.
Now, you think Dr. Booker today correct about the of our NHS? More needs to be done in this debate. But I'm more about that in a minute. Just as a bit, Dr. Hammers stop blaming patients and stuff. Politics have ruined the NHS. They needed to cooperate. The NHA party says NHS is like an elastic band. You can only stretch it as far before it snaps, says Dr. Hermans, has taken the live debate. Australia Worldwide, let me know what you think. NHS Works says 23 MPs vote to sell off NHS. Same 23 happens to line in our pockets as it sounds. One more quickly before we head back to the live debate. Big up the NHS. BBC's question time. The exchange for the who puts the rubbish together. Let's get back to this barrage on the NHS in contrast to the live debates.
Welcome back to the final part of our live debate on the NHS, and let's explore some extreme measures to cure the ailing patient. In the final question in our opinion poll, we asked, should one of its founding principles, free care for all, be scrapped? Should people be charged for treatment in A&E? Would that get rid of some time wasters? Well, 75% of the people we asked said no, there should be no charges. 13% of people said there should be charges. 12% said, bizarrely, they didn't know. But again, a lot more people who class themselves as Conservative or UKIP voters back bringing in charges. That was 1 to 5. The NHS has an annual budget of £115 billion. The experts are saying it's not enough. All the parties pledge more money, but would money actually sort things out? Well, joining us, let's go to our next panel. London GP Dr. Ellie Cannon, columnist and blogger Susie Boniface, Tory MP Andrew Percy and Shadow Health Minister Andrew Gwynn. Welcome all. Can I come to you first as a Conservative? There's a lot of anger in the room about how your party is treating the NHS. A defence, if you would.
Well, I mean, you know, we've increased the NHS budget every single year we've been in power, and I think so resources are part of it. But as somebody, I think, shouted out earlier, actually, it's about making sure that money's going to the right places, and I'm not convinced it always has been. Ahead of this year's A&E crisis, of course, we had ahead of the
in her pockets.
Well,
there's a suggestion. Okay, I can represent it. There's a suggestion. Then we'll get an answer. There's a suggestion that your Conservative colleagues are trying to line the pockets of people who wish to privatise.
I mean, look, the facts are the facts, and we've looked at this, and we're looking at this at the moment on the Health Committee, and private involvement in the NHS was 5% under the last government. It's now 6%. So it has gone up 1%.
It should be 0.
Right.
The question you have to ask...
Susie, come to you in a second. Let's get the other political side. Your Shadow Health Minister, Andrew Gwynn, briefly, how would it be under the Labour Party?
Well, we need to get the right values back into the NHS, and I think that the one thing that's clear from tonight is that the competition element that has been introduced into the NHS has failed. We need proper integration, and we need to get public values back at the heart of our National Health Service.
Ellie Cannon, you're on the front line. Is it cold hard cash?
It's cold hard cash, but we need to put the responsibility back on the patients. Healthcare is a right in this country, as it should be, and it comes with a massive responsibility. In my GP surgery in December, we offered 2,000 appointments to people. 200 of them were wasted by people who didn't turn up. There is no point being shocked by pictures of people queuing outside a GP surgery when people are not turning up. 30% of people who turn up to some A&E departments are there for minor ailments. We need to learn how to look after ourselves.
All right, Susie, there's There's been talk about whether the NHS might be weaponised. Whether that was said or whether it wasn't, how crucial will it be, do you think, in the next few months?
It's been weaponised for 30 years. Margaret Thatcher introduced managers in the 80s, then she introduced the internal market, then Tony Blair said the internal market was a terrible idea, and in 2001, at the start of his second term, he said it was fantastic and he was going to keep it. Both parties have completely, between them, ruined something which for the rest of us, for 63 million people, is the thing in which we are live and born and die. It holds us in its arms, and if it's dying, then who's going to look after us?
So, Andrew Gwynn, Shadow Health, your two parties, even the Lib Dems, you've destroyed the NHS, is a sort of sense. How would you respond?
Well, actually, I think that the last Labour government didn't get everything right, but certainly turned the National Health Service around from where it was that we inherited from the major government. But having said that, what we need to focus on is the cure for the future. That means integrating health and social care, and it means putting more money, £2.5 billion a year extra, in the extra doctors, nurses, midwives and home care workers that are desperately needed on the front line.
We have to stop wasting money as well.
It's time, and we're running tight. In a sentence, Susie, coming to you first, you're a journalist. In a sentence, what is the solution? What do we need to hear? What is the remedy?
We have to stop arguing about what the NHS costs and start recognising what it is worth to us. We have to pay more, and we have to keep politicians out of it.
Susie, thank you. A lot of agreement. Ellie, if you would.
Patients have to take some responsibility for their own health. We need to stop a lot of the wastage that goes on, and we need to reduce our expectations.
Andrew Percy.
Well, I think actually I agree with Andrew in that we need to integrate health and social care together. The 5-year forward view that Simon Stevens has set out, actually there's a lot of consensus among the two parties on that. So, you know, I think
a couple of last views. Karen Danchuk, in a sentence, what would you say in a sentence?
In a sentence, I would say don't privatise the NHS and get rid of the private market. That's what I would say.
Thank you. From the Greens, Gillian Creasy, what would you say?
Well, I would say that we've heard a lot of the drama of the NHS here, but I would say, as a GP myself, that what we need to do is invest any new money further upstream. We need to be investing in general practice, in social care, so that people are looked after at home and don't get to
That's a long
A&E.
Jack Duffin, youth part of UKIP.
Keep NHS free at the point of use. We also want to see the trebling of bureaucracy and middle management gone away. Since the other parties have been there, we've seen an increase again of bureaucracy, and we've had enough of it.
All right. Final word, Cynthia, in a sentence, 48 years a nurse. In a sentence?
In a sentence, I think we need to listen, and we need to take care of the staff that run the NHS, because if we don't do that, if you look after them, they'll look after you, and you will have something for the future.
Well, you can tell the spirit. You can tell the spirit. Without doubt, and thank you for your time, the spirit for the NHS is extraordinary, but there we are. When the NHS was founded, the basic idea was free care for all, rich or poor. The hope was that if we were healthier, it could actually save the country money in the long run. It has been the envy of the world, but it's also made us live longer and demand more from 66. How do we, and I mean all of us, help the NHS survive long into the old age? Our lives depend on it. Thanks to everyone for taking part, and a very good night.
And before we do go, let's quickly some more text. The full version of this will be on tomorrow. Let's do it live. Because it's being a network. We're doing it from 9 o'clock. Tomorrow, some PJ says Rush took place and disappointed waste opportunity. Ed Jones hashtag Penny does. Richard says my mother and father works in the NHS to ensure careers, and they would be tested if they could be a bigger picture now. NHS debate. Mira says love the GP. Number one, take your own health responsibility, reduce your expenses and stop wasting life. There as well. Number one, a comment says nurses at breaking point as number of the work with stress sores and consequent impossible care conditions, says that as well. Also, anyone says hashtag NHS debate, no one but Dr. Lockwood and audience members mentioning person. What a waste of time. Read this instead and leads you to a link as well. And finally, just to move on, Simon DJ James says a nurse work so hard and are often overworked. Give them credit they deserve. Without them, we would crumble. And just one more before we go. NHS is being prepared for an expansion by this government. We have a superb system of healthcare, needs to be funded properly. Oh, too right. Okay, we're back tomorrow for the full story. Hashtag NHS, let me know what you think.